Leigh, I'm
Yeah.
truly honored to have you join us today at the speaker series for AI Path, where we help underrepresented people break into the fields of data science and AI.
Mhm.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I highly appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Of course. So, first, I would like to mention a little bit about you, your
Okay.
background. You started your academic career at the bachelor level in cognitive science at the University of Michigan.
Mhm.
And then you went for your master's in computer science at the University of Southern California.
Mhm.
You worked as a research assistant at both schools, and now you moved to industry at a very exciting role as an artificial intelligence engineer at a local startup in Los Angeles.
Yep.
And this is like very inspiring. I really like your background. And I really, first question would be, I'd really like to know about like your story with data science, how it began. Like, when was the first time you said, "Hey, I want to be a data scientist. I want to get into like statistics, artificial intelligence,"
Sure.
and why were you compelled to do so?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, my background is kind of all over the place. My interest in AI actually started in a philosophy class that I took during my cognitive science major. Yeah,
Right.
it was a conversation on AI ethics. And at the time I was doing research, so I was working with a lot of different kinds of data, mainly psychological and physiological data at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so while I was taking this philosophy course, I noticed that I had a pretty strong philosophy background, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have any sort of computer science or technological
Right.
experience. So I decided to start taking some computer science classes during undergrad just to see how I liked it. And I found it pretty fun, pretty interesting. There was a lot that you could do, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So I just continued with it. And that's when I decided to get my master's. Yeah.
Oh,
And then got to work with a lot of different kind of data during my
right on.
research, during my master's. Yeah.
So your decision was driven by the application side. You found the application to the sciences that you enjoyed with computer science.
Exactly. I exactly like I found something that I was missing knowledge wise in the AI and philosophy kind of intersection right there. And I decided to try to fill that knowledge gap a little bit.
I read one of your articles and I wrote
Okay. Yeah.
your medium, and I read about how you like, if you would ask me if I'd be doing computer science,
Yeah.
you'd laugh, and I truly understand that.
Yeah, it's very surprising for me and also, my friends and my family who had known me to be really into the social sciences and kind of brain sciences. So this is definitely a different step, but I'm glad I took it for sure.
I think it's a great step in the right direction because this is it for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so my first question would be, what do you like the most about working with data and models?
Yeah, so I think the really cool thing about data modeling is the insights that you gain, right? So,
Right.
you have all of these seemingly kind of random numbers and inputs, and it's extremely hard to make sense of that when there's
Mhm.
so much. But it's cool to be able to, pull different kinds of models, apply it to the data, see what kind of insights, what kind of knowledge you can gain from data that we would normally not be able to gain at all. A lot of my work, a lot of my research has been looking at a lot the signal processing or language data, which is very large in volume. So being able to write papers or provide, a useful product, useful application tool using these large amounts of data is very, very neat to see.
Right, right on. Um, okay, my second question. What are your day-to-day activities related to machine learning or to data modeling activities?
Yes. So Right. As an AI engineer, I kind of do data sciencey stuff and then kind of do software engineering stuff and then some research and development. So
Mhm.
day to day with regards to machine learning and modeling, when I'm doing that more data science work, it's a lot of data pre-processing, data cleaning, data wrangling. It's a lot of what we call exploratory data analysis, EDA. Just looking at the data that we have, making visualizations. What kind of insights can we gain just by looking at the data real quick before we even get to the modeling part? So it's a lot of working with the data, getting to know the data, working in Jupyter notebooks, playing around with it a little bit. Then more on the modeling side, it's model selection. We code up different models. I work with usually a team of 1 to 2 other data scientists. We kind of will split up the models to code. We'll just code it up in a Jupyter notebook.
Right.
Once we've agreed on a data format and a data structure, then we'll just try running different models, maybe tweaking hyperparameters if that's the kind of model we're using. Yeah, it's a lot of, kind of this incremental work, like piece by piece, getting the data ready, getting the models ready, feeding the data to the models, doing hyperparameter tuning, comparing metrics. But it's a very, very cool kind of smooth pipeline that we usually go through.
Okay, what about have you I want to know about the difference because you worked in academia, you worked as a research
Yeah.
assistant, you worked in a data centered environment where you analyzed a lot of data with in academia, and then I want to know the difference with industry. Do you have a different and like the data that you see in both environments, and are there like an additional step in industry like where you frame the problem, and was that like different experience? Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there are a lot of differences and a lot of similarities between the data that we see in academia and the data that we see in industry. So
Mhm.
in academia, there's a lot, you can kind of gain access to data by purchasing it or by finding it online. Sometimes that gives you a lot of freedom because you can kind of access whatever, you can afford or you want to.
Right.
Uh, the difficulty with academic data is that you don't get access to typically company data, which can be a lot as well. On the other hand, working in industry, we do get access to company data, which is great. This is proprietary data. No one else sees it other than us.
Yep.
The issue is a lot of companies don't like to share all of their data, or they like to maybe obscure it a little, obfuscate it a little,
Mm-hmm.
anonymize it to kind of maintain that proprietary characteristic.
Right.
The other issue too is that a lot of the data is actually company specific. So when
You
you're
can't
building
generalize.
products, right, like a lot of the goals of modeling is to try to maybe come up with a generalized, as general as possible, right, of a model that can predict many different data points, even if it's not coming from the same source. So in industry, it's difficult because
Mm-hmm.
you kind of can only build models for the most part for one company. You can
Mm.
try to build it for multiple companies as long as they have similar data, but that's not always guaranteed. So that's
That's a
kind of
lot more. Yeah, that's a lot like of specialized work for each company has.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
That makes it more difficult.
Absolutely for modeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right. My next question is, how much time do you spend on on reading in the data, on cleaning the data, wrangling the data?
hmm Yeah, I would say probably 70 to 80% of my time is spent on cleaning and wrangling. That's a really important part of data science. It's what to do with missing data values. Do we keep this column? What do we remove? What do we not remove? Even once you have the model and you're running the data through the model, you're going to keep going back to pre-process like, okay, this, we just don't have enough data points for this feature. We can't keep it, and how does that affect the model? How does that affect the data? So a lot of it, of what I do is data processing and
Mm-hmm.
wrangling. And especially in industry where you're working, with microservices and it's more like applied machine learning, right?
Right.
And you're going to have to work with the data formats from the clients and the data formats that we use on the front end and the back end. And it all has to fit in together as one big pipeline. So yeah, a lot of data wrangling.
Like an iterative process, and
Absolutely.
you probably have to get very intimate with your data, going back and forth with it.
Yes. Yeah. You exactly. You really have to become an expert on the data that you're working with to know what to do with it and to know what's allowed and what's not allowed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so how much time do you spend on final steps, such as plotting, such as model training the model, and
Sure. Yeah. A good amount of time there too. Part of the exploratory data analysis is we do produce graphs and plots and stuff as part of getting to know the data, and especially since we work with clients, they like to be pretty involved in that whole process too. And having visualizations is really nice in industry. It's kind of hard to show them an Excel sheet. So we like to show them some visualizations. Training the model, it can depend. The actual training doesn't usually take very long for us, at least not with some of the projects that I've worked on. But the model improvement, hyperparameter tuning, model kind of selection process is
yeah,
a while too.
yeah, that can
Very
take a
iterative.
while. Yeah, like you don't want to be stuck on training a model.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Um, okay, what is the part of working with data that you like the least?
Oh, okay. That I like the least. Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
question. Um, it can be very messy. I would say that that is kind of my least favorite thing is how messy it can be and how inconsistent each data set is messy in its own way. So, it can be a lot of work to get to know the data. It can take quite a while to get to know the data. And a lot of times you just have to understand the context that it's in. So I've worked a lot with language data, and language data is very different than the kind of we work with like a lot of signal data right now or chemical data. And so you have to spend a lot of time kind of understanding, either language or chemistry to kind of make some informed decisions about the data. So I think when it's messy, it can be really hard to properly get to know the data. But that is just an inherent part of data science. You never get clean data. So it's something that you just kind of live with.
Sounds to me like as an AI engineer or a data scientist, you gotta have to become an expert on whatever project you're kind of working on.
It really helps. It really helps. And that's why, I think it's important for people in data science or tech to have, maybe experience in other fields too. Because for instance, language data, in cognitive science, part of my bachelor's, I had to study linguistics. So having that knowledge going into my technical work was super important. Knowing aspects of language allows you to, understand how to select features. Okay, we can't get rid of these things. We can't just remove these things. And same with the chemistry. I don't have a background in chemistry, so I had to take quite a bit of time to kind of learn chemical properties or interactions that just are inherent to the data. And you can't just take things out or put things in for certain features. So having that knowledge is extremely useful alongside your technical and data science knowledge too.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have like domain knowledge experts doing this kind of work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like working closely, right, with domain experts
Yeah.
will just make your life easier too, and it'll help you understand the data a lot better.
Yeah. Okay. So my next question is about communicating the data. Is it difficult for you as an AI engineer to communicate technical stuff to like your supervisor or to non-technical crowds that you like? Can you share some insights?
Sure. Yes, it is definitely very difficult. Especially in industry where you're kind of working with a lot of different groups, right? You're working with your supervisor, you're working with product people, even the technical people that you're working with are not all data scientists. So Yeah, it's definitely very challenging, and you kind of have to look at the problem and I think break it down into smaller parts, sometimes less detailed. You have to really think about what details to include, what details to not include. I know with my PM, he gets very patient with me because when I update him, sometimes I have just a lot of updates. And so you have to give a lot more background information and really be specific, sometimes with like, okay, what is the problem, but we don't need to go into the details of like the model itself. I don't need to tell them what the alpha is or anything. But yeah, it's definitely challenging. You kind of have to step outside a little bit of your own bubble,
Yeah,
try
exactly.
to try to help the other person. It's a lot of also asking too. It's like, okay, did that make sense, or do you want me to go into detail with anything specifically?
Feedback.
Yeah, exact feedback, exactly. So just kind of, being open, and we have to hop on a lot of calls sometimes because, typing in Slack is just not enough, and that's okay too. But again, like visualizations help a lot as well. Flow charts, graphs, those are really helpful too.
Uh, think that my voice got disconnected. Just give me 1 second for it to come back. Sorry. Sorry. It should be back. Can
Hmm.
you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry
Yeah,
about
no
this.
worries.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't go to like a business meeting and tell them about like a random forest or like
Right.
an add a boost or like, you know,
Right.
you have to tone down the language a little bit.
Exactly.
And my final question would be any general advice for someone who's starting out fresh into like art as an artificial intelligence?
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. My advice would be, look at the tutorials online, look at things like Kaggle. There's a lot of resources, good resources. It might be hard to parse through, but that's okay. Just getting used to the language, getting used to the overall structure, I think is really important for an emerging data scientist or AI engineer. For AI specifically, I would say stay on top of current trends too. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of components that make up AI, and there's always something new coming out in natural language or in computer vision.
Right.
So I would say, make sure that you're reading up on kind of the latest trends just to stay on top of it, because new models are coming out, new architectures are coming out every month, every day.
Every second, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I remember going to NACL and hearing about BERT, which was the most like state of the art advanced NLP, big transformer model. And then as soon as
Mhm.
I got home, I already saw news about something else. So it's,
Roberta and like
yes,
they're
XLNet, like and then there's the GPT. So it's very fast evolving.
Mhm.
But it's fun to learn about it, it's really cool to see this new technology. So I would suggest, yeah, staying on top of it and then go through the tutorials just to get a handle on the language and the structure of, coding and stuff like that.
So do you think it's important to for someone starting out to start number one with the academic literature and
Mm.
number two like the practical side, you know?
Yeah, I see what you mean. For me, I actually think someone who's starting out, I would not look too deep into the academic literature itself. There are a lot of really good websites, or even, something like the New York Times. They have their own technology section where they cover kind of up to date things. I would even say go on Twitter. That's
Hmm.
actually where I find most of my newest research. All the academics use Twitter.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it's fantastic because when they first, it was the same for my advisor too. When they first publish something, they first tweet about it. So I have found actually all of my biggest news that is literally first announced right on Twitter. So if you're interested in NLP, follow the NLP group. If you're interested in CV, follow the CV group.
Right.
But even AI organizations, they're always posting on there and always interacting. So you can learn a lot from Twitter discussion. So I would do that, and then the coding kind of in parallel, which is the more practical side.
Uh-huh.
So you get a feel for what's currently happening in the AI industry, but you're also honing your skills. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of really good tutorials, even on Medium. There again, Kaggle is a really good data science site where you can look at data sets, play with data sets,
Right.
just writing your own scripts. Try writing a small data science pipeline. I think that would be really useful.
Right. I find the practical side
Yeah.
most helpful to me because especially like with the now we have like we can explore math and statistics in an animated way and
Yeah.
computational way, and it makes it much easier. And I when I read the literature, it kind of clicks better after. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think doing, kind of both is super helpful. Yeah. Doing a deep dive in the actual, like journals and articles might be a bit tough. I mean, it's hard even for me,
Yeah.
sometimes. It gets very technical. But yeah, getting just an overview and then, right, creating those and really honing in on those practical skills, I think would be really useful. So,
Uh,
how to talk to other data scientists and other researchers, but then you
mhm.
also know how to build things yourself too. Yeah,
So probably find the right balance, the right combination.
exactly, exactly.
Excellent. Do you have anything else for us before we close?
No, I think that was all. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed it. I learned a whole lot from you today, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again.